Hey guys, welcome back. Final lecture today on World War I. Last time we spoke, I introduced the PPC, or the Paris Peace Conference. As you know, the goal of the PPC was a harmonious, peaceful, tranquil post-war Europe. Ironically, when it concludes in the summer of 1919, they're going to write into law what is known as the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, one of the most significant documents of the 20th century, it's a failed peace, it's a flawed peace, commonly known by the nickname the peace in quicksand. The document's going to lead directly, a linear path, a linear line, to the genesis of World War II some 20 years later. So last time we spoke, I talked about the big four, the four nations and leaders that have the job, monumental job of crafting a post-war peace. Clemenceau of France, Lloyd George of England, the somewhat moralizing president of the US, Woodrow Wilson, and fourth, a short, angry, hot-tempered Italian leader named Vittorio Orlando. Side note, Clemenceau always called Orlando by the nickname the Weeper. The Weeper, and we'll see why here in a few minutes. So back to Italy. Italy, as you know, only joined the Triple Entente because of the promise of valuable land called Dalmatia in the Balkan Peninsula. That was the reason why they flip-flopped from the alliance on the eve of war in 1914. So the question is, why do you think at Versailles, or at the PPC, the other three members of the Big Four were sort of vacillating a little bit, or going back and forth about, do we give Italy that land or not? So all of a sudden now the promise of land in Dalmatia was not a foregone conclusion. A couple of things. Number one, there was the issue of loyalty. After all, Italy was a charter member of the Triple Alliance. So were they loyal to the other members of the Entente? Not so sure. Secondly, maybe more important to Wilson, Clemenceau, and Lloyd George, is that how did Italy fight during the war for the Entente? To put it succinctly, they were a disaster. The Italian front was always precarious, was always wobbly. The English and the French were constantly bailing out Italy, so they fought poorly, and maybe that land now is a little bit in question. Let's fast forward here a little bit. About 1 month now into the proceedings at the PPC, Woodrow Wilson, the US president, steps out from a long day of negotiating. He comes out to a big, beautiful veranda at Versailles, and the foreign press is there. The press is there, flash bulbs are going off, and journalists are writing down the things that he was saying. He walks out and he says something curious and rather thinly veiled. He says, "I only hope that Italy will respect natural boundaries." So what is he saying there, guys? He's saying pretty directly, thinly veiled, Italy, you're not going to get Dalmatia. You fought poorly. Dalmatia is not part of the natural frontier of Italy. You're not getting Dalmatia. The next day, the Big Four report to their negotiating room, and here is where Orlando gets that reputation as being the Weeper. They walk in, and Orlando is slamming his fist down and kicking and screaming, and he's volatile and begins to shed real tears about the loss of Dalmatia. Shortly after, Orlando and Italy pull out of the PPC. He goes back to Italy minus the land they were promised, known forever as the proverbial, in quotes, stab in the back. What is the long-term significance of the stab in the back by the Entente? It leads to the creation of a foundation for political extremism. Because of financial woes, because of the stab in the back, because of the rise of communism there in Italy, we see the rise of Benito Mussolini and the rise of the fascist party in Italy. All right, let's look now at the actual document known as the Treaty of Versailles. The first provision and most important provision in Treaty of Versailles is known as Article 231. Article 231, also known as the War Guilt Clause. This was the provision that Hitler and the Nazi Party always pointed back to. How dare they blame the entirety of the war, the cause of the war, on Germany? You know, we had imperialism and nationalism and militarism, and an unlikable Archduke was shot and killed in Sarajevo. All kinds of ambiguities, and Germany wonders, why is the German Empire being blamed for the start of the war? But it leads to an amazing humiliation, just anger, humiliation, and resentment at the powers to be for blaming them for the war. Plus, with Article 231 is going to come a major war reparation or war fine. Upfront payment of $5 billion. $5 billion upfront for an army or a country was already financially pretty unstable following the war. So $5 billion fine upfront and $33 billion over the entire length of the fine levied against the Germans. Okay? What does it lead to? Complete recession, hyperinflation, or the devaluing of money. Germany is in a really, really bad way financially, really on the verge of financial collapse in the 20s as a result of these reparations. In addition to money and the blame game, Clemenceau, Wilson, Lloyd George, they're going to try to neuter, demolish, smash, destroy the German military to prevent the future rise of Germany in the future down the road. They're going to try to limit future German aggression by trying to neuter their military. They put a cap on the military at 100,000 men. They take away U-boats and battleships and poison gas and artillery, all the weapons of modern day warfare. They're going to abolish German military academies, the foundation for the growth of the military. But again, the goal is trying to create a more comfortable buffer zone on the border of France and Germany. This is all the paranoia, probably legitimate, but all the fear of Clemenceau on the border. Let's look thirdly at the newly configured map of Europe post-World War I. The map looks a lot different based upon the paranoia of Clemenceau, the fear of communism, all these inner workings. The map looks a lot different following World War I and following the Treaty of Versailles. First of all, what land goes back immediately to France? They lost it in 1870, and now Alsace-Lorraine goes back to France, where it remains today. Clemenceau also wants what he calls a buffer zone on the border of France and Germany. He creates a buffer zone known as the DMZ or the Demilitarized Zone, which is located in a region called the Rhineland. So the DMZ, or the Rhineland region, is an area from the Rhine River all the way west to the French border and about 30 miles to the east as well. No German guns or military apparatus can be found in the DMZ. Only Entente, mostly French, military folks and guns could inhabit that area for the next 15 years. So we now have a foreign occupation in the Rhineland, or the DMZ, the French, and no German militarism in that region until the mid-1930s, says the Treaty of Versailles. Other land configurations, other changes, shifts, other upheaval. Let's look now to the eastern segment of Europe. Let's look to the east a little bit. Now, as we look at Eastern Europe, as this war concludes, we're going to see that three countries or empires lose a lot of land. The USSR, Austria-Hungary, and Germany are all going to lose land. And again, this becomes Clemenceau's baby here on the former Eastern Front. He wants to create a nation or a buffer of new nations along the Eastern Front that he calls the Cordon Sanitaire. The Cordon Sanitaire is the French word to explain that there is an epidemic, there is an illness rising in Europe, and they want to create a beltway of new countries in Eastern Europe to subdue, to crush, to limit the expansion of this illness. Now, the illness is not a pandemic. It's not actual disease. It is philosophical disease. They're worried, Clemenceau, and also Wilson and George, about the spread of communism. They create the cordon sanitaire, a beltway of newly created nation states along the Eastern Front to buffer the expansion of Russia and the USSR and communism to further infiltrate Europe. Their goal is to prevent further infiltration of communism into Europe. They create new nation states in the form of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, all those Baltic states. So I'll say it again. Lithuania is created, Estonia, Latvia, Finland. In addition, now we see the creation of a new state called Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia, we have now an independent Austria and an independent Hungary. We have the formation of a brand new nation state called Poland. Poland, for the first time, is a brand new nation state. And also, this is the dream discussed earlier back in the day by Serbia. We see now the rise of a new state called Yugoslavia. These are all part of the cordon sanitaire to prevent the expansion of the communist ideology during this time period. Interesting, guys, with Poland as a new nation state, there was this perception that Poland and the Polish people had always gotten the proverbial stab in the back as well. They create a new pocket of land, a strip, a narrow strip of land or corridor of land from Poland directly through Germany to the sea. They wanted to give Poland a chance for survival and success. They create what they called a Polish corridor, a narrow piece of land directly through Germany to the sea to aid them with their trade, their commerce. And of course, looking down the road here, who goes to the Polish corridor first to regain that land during the 1930s? Hitler is going to go there directly to begin World War II during the smashing of Poland to start the Second Great War. So there's a new Polish corridor as well that causes more bitterness, more anger. I want to mention one thing about these new countries. We have a lot of people that used to be German citizens and they now belong to new countries. They used to be, ethnic majorities in a former German nation state or kingdom, and now they belong to a new nation state called Czechoslovakia, or a new, smaller, reduced Austria. So you've got a lot of people who are angry during the 1920s. They've been moved from their former country into a brand new country. They're now an ethnic minority. Just understand that the map of Europe is a lot different following the reconfiguration of this land after World War I and that Treaty of Versailles. A couple more things, guys, and we'll call it a day. Two more things. They create a system, the remaining big three of George, Wilson, and Clemenceau, called the mandate system. The mandate system was designed to take away Germany's former colonies and give them now to more civilized countries, namely France and England. Former German colonies in Africa, this would be Tanzania and Namibia. Tanzania and Namibia are given over to the English. Up in the north now, the Cameroons used to be German, they now belong to the French. Let's look for a second now. As part of the mandate system, let's turn our focus towards the Middle East. Lands such as Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq used to be land controlled by the Germans. They're now given to the English. So again, Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq are now given over to the English. Syria goes over to the French. One final thing, what to become of Wilson's League of Nations? They do vote the League of Nations in, okay? It's accepted, written into the Treaty of Versailles. Ironically, although it's part of the Treaty of Versailles and it's created to the benefit of European countries against illegitimate rogue nations, when Wilson goes back with his baby, his League of Nations, to the U.S. Congress, Their fear of foreign entanglements leads to the U.S. Senate voting it down. So it's voted down by the U.S. Senate. Ironically, his own country says no to Wilson's League of Nations. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.